Right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Using Docker for Infrastructure and Operations track. So I'll be your MC, and that just means I introduce the speakers, so you won't see very much of me. So our first speaker in this track is Lee Namba from Docker. His Twitter handle is Lee Namba, and he's going to talk to you about how to build your container strategy. Take it away, Lee.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Welcome to DockerCon. Did you guys enjoy that keynote session today? Yeah? That was okay? Okay, so my name is Lee Namba, and I run the professional services for Docker right here in Europe. What does that mean? It means that as a team, we have a bunch of solution architects, and what we do is we go into our customers and we deploy Docker within their enterprise. Okay, so what we're going to do today is I want to share with you guys some of our best practices that we've learned in working with these customers on how to build a container strategy. And what that's going to mean is basically going from taking an application, discovering an application estate, to getting some first apps in production, even all the way to migrating thousands of applications. Okay? All right. So we all have dreams, and maybe some of you in this room are dreaming about microservices, all in the cloud, all weaved together very nicely with a service mesh, right? And all of these can span to multiple clouds, and all you have to do basically is sit back and relax, and then you can think about the next technologies that are coming down the pipe, right? But we all know that this is reality today. So you have some monolithic applications. Every once in a while, you have some microservices sprinkled in, and you're wondering how are you going to get all of these to the cloud? And to make it more complicated, you have all of these as-a-services today. So for example, you have infrastructure as a service, and you have software as a service, and platforms as a service, and now we even have functions as a service. And then how are we going to bring all of those together? It can get really confusing, right? And on top of that, you might even have a CEO who just loves developers. He thinks they're the most important people in the entire company. So how are we going to get to the cloud? Well, since we're at DockerCon, I think we all know the answer to that. You saw it this morning in a container platform, okay? Now, I'm going to share with you guys some of these best practices that we've learned from our customers, including MetLife and Bosch, Societe Generale, as you guys have seen. And even some of them are giving talks at DockerCon, so I'd highly encourage you guys to go and see their talks. Now I'm going to show you an outline for building your container strategy. Now within your enterprises, you might have some pockets of people who are already using Docker. They might be early adopters, enthusiasts, and those guys are great. We love them, right? But then how do you get that to be more adopted by your mainstream developers, some of those who don't necessarily use Docker yet? So what we're going to do is start with a discovery phase. We need to figure out how to get to analyze an application estate, figure out what types of applications that you have, and then even build a business case. You guys, probably going to need to go out and ask for some money to build a container platform. So you're going to need a return on investment, and you're going to need to justify it. So we're going to do that in a discovery phase. Now, let's imagine we've built that, we go out, and we've presented that to our boss, and we got a budget, yeah, you're all happy. So what do? Do we go out and we buy a whole bunch of servers and buy a whole bunch of infrastructure and then hire up a team, and then we design out our architecture, and we deploy that, and then we announce to your entire company, hey guys, come onto the Docker platform. Now, this isn't the 90s. That would be considered a waterfall process, and as everybody knows, that's just a recipe for disaster, right? So today's world, it's all about agile. It's all about failing often, failing fast. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get some applications into production. Not thousands of them, but let's get just a couple applications into production. Okay, so now you think we got an app into production. Now we can scale it out, right? Well, not so fast. First things you got to do is you got to put in place some more services and processes and a governance piece before you start onboarding applications at scale. So we're talking about things like training and support and operating models and service level agreements. And once you do all of that, then you can start to move to production at scale, okay? Now once you have those applications hopefully all migrated, then you can start to realize the return on those investments, and you can start to innovate. And that's where you can take those monolithic applications that you guys had, start to break them up into microservices, or even take those applications that were deployed on-premise and then move them into the cloud. And you can do that all in your innovation phase. So for the rest of this talk, what I'm going to do is go through with you on each of these phases. Okay, build a business case. Now one thing to ask yourself is why? Why are we doing this? Now there's several main reasons that we see with our customers. The first reason that comes to mind is very easy. Capital expenditures. We all know that containers are lighter weight and smaller than VMs, so you can get a much higher compute density. So that's one reason. Then the second reason is operational expenditures. Containers just make everything faster. What used to take months now takes weeks. What takes weeks can take days, days to minutes, minutes to seconds. Everything goes faster. And when you guys do that, you'll be able to save resources in the deployment and then use those to do more innovation instead of just doing deployment. And then the final reason, which actually might be the most important one that we hear from customers, is agility. What does that mean? It means being able to deploy new features faster than their competitors. So this might mean even staying ahead of their competition, or if there's a new market that opens up, they need to create new applications fast, or they're going to miss out on an entire new marketplace. So that's incredibly important. And when you ask yourself this question of why are we even doing this, it might even be a combination of all three of these. Now, not all applications are created equal, and they're not all as easy to Dockerize. So some of you in here might have heard only do stateless applications, and that's no longer true. Personally myself, I've Dockerized big databases, even including primaries and secondary databases with backups. It's possible today with the storage solutions that we have. Now on the bottom, what I want to do here is give you guys just a high-level view of how you can start to think about categorizing your application estate. On the bottom axis, we have stateful and stateless, as I mentioned. And then on the vertical axis, we have clustered and standalone. Now the first set of applications, these are the easy ones. They'll be stateless and they'll be standalone. So these will be your existing web servers. They could be reverse proxies, load balancers, simple Node apps or PHP apps, and your Spring Boot microservices. These are the easy ones. Now as we get a little bit harder, we start to introduce storage. So at this point, we're going to do standalone relational databases. They're going to need storage solutions. CMSs, they need somewhere to store documents, portals. CICD, you need your workspace to run all of your jobs. Those are going to be a little bit more difficult. And then finally, the most difficult ones are where you have not only storage, but they're also clustered. What does that mean? It means all of those instances, they need to talk to each other. So you have to open up even new networking between all of your different instances. So I hope this gives you just a high-level way of thinking about this application migration. But we can refine it even further. And what we do is we define different archetypes. As an example, here's a 2-tier web app, and that might take a certain time or level of effort to Dockerize. And then we have a 2-tier web app with authentication. Then we move to 3-tier web apps. So you guys can get the picture of, we can then refine these and categorize them into different archetypes. And that could help you later on, as we'll see, into creating a migration plan. Now, even though you might have some of these applications which are easy to Dockerize, it might not be worth it. So what we want to do is develop some type of scorecard. As an example, we might have a really easy application to Dockerize. Maybe it even takes 2 days, who knows, less, half an hour. But what if they only deploy that application once a year? Is that worth Dockerizing? It's not really. Why even do it? Or it might be an end-of-life application. So maybe just try and keep it running. Another example is how many environments you have to deploy to. So I've been on some projects where we literally had 11 different environments to deploy to. It was a very big project, multiple versions in flight, so we had multiple versions that needed to be tested simultaneously. That would be a great candidate to Dockerize because you're deploying to so many environments at the same time. One other thing to think about as well is the team's culture. This is overlooked a lot. But you might have a critical application, it's deployed a lot, deployed to many environments, but the team itself, they don't want to, they're stuck in their old ways. They don't want to move. So you need to consider that. They might not even want to Dockerize. So think about this in your application migration plan and develop a scorecard. Now, in Dockerizing any application, it's going to cost some money. I mean, that's just a fact. Even though the demos that you guys saw this morning reduce those costs, it's still going to require some effort. But once you've made an initial investment, you'll start to see the first benefit you'll have is in team competence. So these people who will start to learn about containers, they'll start to become more motivated, and it'll help with your retention of these talented developers. Quickly after that, when you start getting your first applications into your development cluster, you'll start to see agility. So we'll be able to take those things that used to take months to deploy or weeks to deploy, and those will go down to hours or even minutes. And then once you've deployed it over even more environments, you'll start to see those operational savings in that you don't have to have as many resources dedicated to just deploying constantly to environments. I've been on some projects where we had a whole team dedicated to that, and we've been able to shrink that down, and those people were freed up to do a lot more innovative things. And then finally, as we get into scale, you'll start to realize your infrastructure savings. So all of those containers will shrink down your infrastructure, and you will even save on licenses as well. So now that we have a basic business plan or business case for return on investment, let's go to get those first applications in production. Now, once again, we want to take a crawl, then walk, then run approach, and not just go over a waterfall. Now, at Docker, we've developed a deployment methodology. I'll go through this quickly. What we do is most companies, they have a POC, they've done it internally, and then we take them through a quick assessment. So what do we do here is we look at their existing teams, their people, their processes, we train them, and we even, if necessary, we help them choose those first applications to get into production. We do plan, and then we kick off the project. And we go into 4 work streams. Now, the first work stream is probably the most important one. It's everything that's non-technical, and this is governance. This could mean, as I mentioned before, this could be training, it could be support, operating models, service level agreements, and even doing internal marketing. But it's very important to hash these things out before you start installing things, because it could really change your architecture. Now, once you've talked about this, you don't have to resolve all these problems all at once. Then you can go on to building out your platform. So the platform work stream is for all the ops people. This is installing the software, making sure it's highly available, there's disaster recovery, and it's integrated to all of your existing systems within your company. The next work stream is the pipeline. So this is CICD, and making sure that everything is being deployed in a secure fashion in your supply chain. And then the final work stream is your applications work stream. That's where we actually write Docker files, compose files, stack files, Helm files, Kubernetes manifests, what have you, that actually will allow you to Dockerize your application, deploy it automatically through the CI/CD pipeline onto your Docker enterprise platform, all hopefully following the governance that you've put in place. Now, once you've completed all of these 4 work streams, you're ready to go live. And then the bottom 3 work streams, they form the basis for your container platform service. Now, when you get new applications that you want to onboard or migrate, all you have to do is run that top stream over and over. And that'll be the way for you to start to migrate all of those applications. So that's a very quick way of getting your first applications into production. Now, let's talk about going at scale, right? Now, before we do that, I want you guys to back up a little bit and think about your organization. Is it centralized organization? Is it a distributed organization? Or maybe you're organized in different business lines. And one person even told me that this is their company's organization. I guess it's a startup or something. Okay, but how is that going to impact what you build? So to give you an example, if you have a highly centralized organization, you might want to consider building out a containers as a service. So what this is it's a centralized system, multi-tenant, where each tenant is functionally isolated, but you have one central service. On the opposite side of that is what we call CLaaS, or clusters as a service. This means that your central IT team might provide a cluster for each individual project team, or it could even be to a business line. And what some customers even do is they do a combination of both, where they start with the development cluster being centralized because it doesn't need as much security, and then once they get to production, then they start to isolate things. A lot of times it actually does come down to budget. So who's paying for it? So really think through that. Another way in which your organization can influence what you deliver is in CICD. So we get a lot of requests for containers to help you deliver CICD. So once again, you could do this centralized. We see that a lot today. Everybody has a big centralized continuous integration. you can run into some plugin hell with that because one team needs one plugin, another team needs a plugin. You can have clashes there. So what containers can do is you can containerize those CICD components, and then you can use that to distribute a CICD for each team. And we've done this very successfully actually at Société Générale. So what they do now is they do a decentralized, it's a Jenkins as a service actually. So each new application team can get their own CI/CD cluster, and they can install whichever plugins they want, and all of that is distributed very quickly through containers. So think about what services you want to provide to your teams. Now, besides the what, you also need to think through different levels. So we talked about SLAs before. So as an example, you can provide a sandbox level. And what that would be is that would be for people who want to discover what Docker is, they want to do a POC, maybe you can train on it. And it wouldn't require high performance, you don't need to do backups on there. It does, you might need some storage, but you're not going to be spreading it out over multiple data centers necessarily. Next level above that is a development cluster. So this is where you have your development teams, they come on board, they do all of their building and their testing and integration. And once again, it might not need to be completely secure, but they will be functionally isolated. Next level above that is production. So at first you might want to just do internal facing applications. So it doesn't have to be as secure. But you do want it to be highly available, high performance, secure, and you can offer, let's say, some business day support to your internal customers. And then the final level is your mission critical applications. So these ones, you want it to be the highest performance, highest availability, highest security, and you might even want to think about providing a white glove service. Now what would that mean? It'd mean you'd take these teams and you would train them up and you would really help them to onboard to the platform. And you would of course want to give them business critical support. So 24/7, follow the sun. So think through these different service classes that you can offer to your teams. All right, so now we know what we're going to deliver, and we've defined out our service level classes or agreements, and we've done our scorecard. So now we can start to build an application migration plan. So we got our first apps into production, and now we can think about, well, what's our next phase? So this is an example. We can do, let's say, the highest priority applications, or we can do the ones that have the highest ROI. And maybe we'll do only ones that are on stable technology stacks that we know. And let's just stick with local teams. We don't want to have calls from all around the world. Let's get all of those guys onboarded. Then the next phase, let's expand that out. So let's go to the entire business line. Let's introduce additional tech stacks. And then we can start to think about distributing to outside of our local teams so we can offer a little broader support. And then the final one is general availability, and that's where we open it up to the world. So that's instead of doing our waterfall method, right, let's do this in a progressive way. Okay, so you built it, you know what you're offering, you have a plan to make all of this migration. You just have to build it, right? And then everybody will come. That's not true. In a large enterprise, there might be thousands or hundreds of technology offerings. How are your application teams even going to know that this container platform even exists within your company? You got to do some marketing. Some ideas are an entry hall event. You guys all came to DockerCon. You can have a big whale balloon right in your entry hall. Developers come in, they go, what is this big whale? You hand them a flyer right there. They can go to your sandbox environment that you guys have created, and they can already start playing with it. So that's one way of attracting new users. You can then even have a Docker day. So this is getting people even from Docker to come speak at your company. And you can even create a champions program. So this would be your early adopter enthusiast, and they can go through and they can start teaching other teams. And then finally, there's swag, right? Who doesn't love swag? You can give t-shirts and stickers. So a little story about that sticker is that's actually one from one of our customers where they did a mashup of their logo and our logo, and they distributed that to everybody. Okay, so you built your platform, you advertised it to all your development teams, maybe even had your CEO do an announcement to the company, and but you still got to wonder, what is their onboarding experience going to be like? Now, we put in place the marketing and service levels, but we still got to put in place, let's say, some training, because they're going to wonder what to do. They're going to run into problems, so they're going to need somebody to call. They're going to need to know what they need to deliver and what the platform is responsible for. So we got to figure out some operating models, and then even once they've learned all of that, put that into a knowledge base. So on training, Docker offers different training courses. Some of you might have even done that. But beyond training, I want to talk a little bit about culture change. So does everybody here know about pets versus cattle? Okay, for those of you who don't know, pets are the old way of doing things where you actually name servers, you take care of them, and you love them. And cattle is the more modern way, cloud native way of you have anonymous servers. If one of them gets sick, then you just replace it. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Okay, for me, that girl is a little bit too young. These are most of the ops guys that I know. So they have some server, it smells bad, nobody wants to touch it, who knows what's living on it, it's just gross, right? But there's some ops guy who's there who doesn't mind the smell, knows exactly where the things are, and they're able to take care of that server, right? Now, how are you going to get this guy to change his mind and his ways of doing things? So true story here. We're at a large customer, and what they would do is when one of their containers had a problem, what they would do is they would always want to go through and troubleshoot the container, and then even patch the container. And we had to keep telling them, no, don't patch the container. Let's just get rid of it, spin up a new container, and then let's take that other one offline, find what's wrong with it, introduce those changes into the image, and then deploy that new image. But that took almost a year to get them into this new way of doing things. So on talking about operating model, today it's pretty simple. You code, you deploy, you run. And that might mean there's a development team, hands it over to an ops team for deployment. Now, when you Dockerize things, it introduces a new step. And you need to figure out who's going to actually do that step. So some options here are maybe it's the development team that does it. Maybe there's a new DevOps team, a containerization team that does it. Maybe that whole process is automated. So you just check in your code, it does it automatically, and then it deploys it, and then the ops team just runs it. And then finally, if you already are in a DevOps culture, then it's just one other step in the process. So depending on how far you guys are already shifted left, whether you're siloed or you're already fully DevOps, that's going to influence the operating model you put in place. Some other examples are end-of-life applications. So as I mentioned before, you might not even have a development team. So you can have a DevOps team do the containerization, hand it over to your ops team. Or you have, let's say, hundreds or thousands of applications to migrate. At that point, you can think about externalizing the Dockerization in a migration factory, and then even to run the platform, externalizing that to manage services. Support. You got all of these developers, you're going to need to support them. So first level could just be, self-service portal. One level before that, have some, below that is have some experts there. And then they can then call Docker. So this is if they've bought Docker Enterprise. So sorry for the free plug for our company. And then, once again, your mission critical applications will need to have 24/7 follow the sun support. This is what's going to limit your adoption to this platform. All right. We've put in place this whole governance piece, and we can then even rename it maybe and call it a center of excellence. Now, the last piece is once we've realized these savings, we can start to innovate. So you've done your traditional application migrations, and now you can even expand those to IoT, to edge computing, to machine learning, other types of workloads. And then you can even take your monolithic applications, start to break them out into microservices, or take those applications and start moving them into the cloud. All right, so to recap really quickly, we went through the discovery phase with analyzing your application estate, building out a business case. Then we got some first applications into production. We readied ourselves for production at scale and started to follow our application migration plan. And finally, with the savings, we're able to innovate. Now, I hope for you that this will allow you to accomplish your original dream, which is getting lots of microservices, all running in multiple clouds, and maybe even make your CEO happy too. Thank you. If you like this presentation, don't forget to vote, and I'll take some questions.
What Lee said. If you can repeat the question, that would be great. Are there any questions to start us off? Hands up. Well, I've got one to get us started then. So if you mentioned that Docker can kind of help you get started on this journey. So what's the first question that you ask a new client who's just starting out with this?
The first question that we actually ask to our customers is what is their use case or what is their business case? A lot of times we'll see customers that they just say, okay, we're looking at containers, and we really want to figure out what's behind their motivation. Do they want to save money? Do they want to be more agile? Because that can really shape how we even talk to them and how we structure our conversations with them.
Makes a lot of sense. Anyone else? Hands up. You might have to wave quite a lot. Oh yeah, in the back there.
Back there.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't hear.
With you with the mic.
Okay, you got that one.
IT's got it.
My question was, are the sheets going to be made available?
Yes, this presentation will be made available.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, my question is, did you done studies with your customers, like for example those that already using cloud but traditional EC2, for example, deploying applications in there? After moving to Docker, let's say, what is the saving on infrastructure, or what is the range that you have seen?
Great question. So to repeat what you said, to make sure I understood, is have we done return on investment studies with our existing customers? Okay, just to the
not just like full-scale return on investment, but let's say just focused on AWS cost. For example, if it is AWS or any other cloud, because the density increases, as you said, right? So just taking that effect into like return on investment kind of equation.
So we have done we have some return on investment studies and analysis. It's not necessarily specific to AWS. Our data point size or our data set isn't that large quite yet. But in general, what we have seen in cloud, and we're span multiple clouds, we have customers who are on multiple clouds, is at that point, they're a little bit less interested in the CapEx spending, and what they're really a lot more interested is in the agility. So we have, and their deployment and how much faster it goes. You're going to gain some on capital expenditures and reducing your infrastructure. That's for sure. But another thing that we see from our customers that they're very interested in is if they are on AWS and then prices do start to increase, they want to have that option to be able to go to another cloud or even bring it to a private cloud. We see that scenario quite a lot, actually. They're all afraid of cloud lock-in.
You have mentioned application migration factory, a very technical term for something like a business unit. Can you elaborate a little more on it? Because from experience we had with our customers, this is the biggest bottleneck. They have legacy and they would like to run it, but that's the problem.
So application factory, it would be a combination, like in a normal factory, of tools and people and processes. So there are, we have partners, large partners, and they have set up some application migration factories. Some of them are even offshore. And what they're able to do is handle volume. So what we have to do is establish a process with them of saying, next to the customer, next to the application development teams, what are the assets that you need to hand over to the application migration factory, and then they'll go ahead and Dockerize it and then send it back to the customer. So it's a combination of tooling and people and processes. But we don't today have a product called Application Migration Factory. But you guys did see the Docker Application Converter, so that's one of the tools that we would use in an Application Migration Factory.
Great. Got a question back here.
I was interested earlier on when you were talking about the business case and you had the question why. You spoke about CapEx, OpEx, and agility. What interested me is you didn't mention anything around security availability. Is that something you're finding people aren't factoring into their business case necessarily?
They don't. Security, it seems to us, is more of a compelling event today, and it manifests itself in two ways. One is in agility, so that is how fast can I deploy security patches. And it does manifest itself in the operational expenses, because before deploying security patches would cost a lot more, whereas with containers, deploying security patches becomes a lot less expensive. So it does end up going into both the agility and into the OpEx. But we don't, I mean, you could consider security as another major why to do it, but if you're doing it at that point, I think that you've already had a bad experience and it's a compelling event, and you should have thought of that before, right?
Yeah, during the discovery phase, what are the 3 or 4 things we should check for an application to qualify that this applications can be containerized and it will fit in which category?
Okay, so how do we determine which applications are good candidates for containerization? Those can be many. A lot will depend. So that at the very bottom, there's, is it the technology compatible? That's one of the first things we'll look for is, how much refactoring of the code might need to be done. Is it on the right libraries or the base-dependent libraries? Does it even exist? So that'll be the first thing is the technology. Then moving a little bit higher than that, then we'll start to take in other factors such as, is it worth it, right? So how often do you deploy it? How many environments do you deploy to? And we have tools and models where what we do is we literally have a return on investment in different categories of applications or archetypes of applications. And we go through and we have several qualifiers saying, how secure is this application? How highly available does it need to be? What are the performance requirements? How old is it actually? And those will all go into a big formula or a model that we have, which calculates an approximate level of effort. And then we start to ask things like, how often do you deploy it? and on how many environments. And those coupled together can actually spit out a return on investment for whether this application is worth it to Dockerize or not.
Okay, we're pretty much at the end of our time. We might have time for one more very quick one. See one more hand here.
We came into that area to use commercially off-the-shelf products. So, can you hear me? We tend to use commercially off-the-shelf products. So we need a strategy to get our vendors on board so that they still support them even if we do Dockerize them. Have you got any, I suppose we just, from what you're saying, we've got to prove to ourselves internally, then prove to the vendors out externally as well.
Yes, it's building those business cases. Some of the larger commercial off-the-shelf applications, you know, where they're obviously partners with Docker and they've already been certified. So the larger ones are usually taken care of. It's the smaller ones that we see that are a little bit more obscure sometimes. And we've done our fair share of Dockerizing those, and they can be a lot more difficult. So COTS we would put more on the level of higher level of effort and maybe less return on investment. That's just our general experience.
Okay, thanks very much, Lee. I'll give Lee a hand.
Thank you, guys. I'll also be doing a hallway track at 3 p.m. in the hallway session. So if you guys are around and have more questions.
Great.
Thank you.